Kumlen Lablat Gemara. We are up today's blot of Daf Mem Beis. We're up to Mem Aleph Mem Beis, the very bottom of the page. Rabbi Yossi told us that if on Yom Tov, the first day of Yom Tov, you walked outside with your lulav by mistake, it happened to be on Shabbos, because in those days they used to bench lulav on Shabbos. If it's the first day, as we'll see in the Gemara later, tomorrow. So he said, if you did by mistake, then the mitzvah got you all excited. It's called a tov b'dvar mitzvah. You made a mistake because of the mitzvah, and you're doing a mitzvah, so therefore you're excused. Called extenuating circumstances. Says the Gemara, Abaye says, Lo yishonu. When does Rabbi Yossi say you're excused? Only if you haven't done the mitzvah yet, so the pressure is on. Once you're yotze, you're a chayiv. Why? Because then, if you were yotze before you took it outside, even though maybe the mitzvah got you excited, but you're no longer doing a mitzvah. It's the excuse, the pressure of the mitzvah, and the fact that you're going to fulfill the mitzvah. The two combined is what excuses you from a korban chatis. But if you already fulfilled the mitzvah, then it's reduced by a step. The pressure is less, and therefore it's not excusable, and you need to bring in korban. So I think what I asked the question, what are you talking about? If we learn the psachim, the moment you lift the lulav, you're already zeicha, you're already kainim. The moment you lift the lulav, you already fulfilled the mitzvah. So as soon as he picked it up to go outside, he already did the mitzvah. So when he walks outside, there's no longer a mitzvah involved. So how can we be? Rabbi Yossi says, "Tov b'dvar mitzvah," that you are potter. If you haven't done the mitzvah yet, it's impossible. You always did the mitzvah already. Says the Gemara, you turned it around. So we normally learn havcha means you turned it upside down. The Ben Chananel learns right over here in the Gemara, havcha means you swapped hands. You took from your right hand, you put in your left hand. The lulav you put in your left hand, that's in your right hand. So Ben Chananel is machadish that it's possible if you have them in the wrong hand. All those who learn the way I told you means turning upside down don't agree, and they hold that even though ideally you should hold the lulav in your right hand as you can left, but it's not a psul if you swap it around. Okay, and I told you last time, havcha is a machlekes havcha means. Ramah brings the Shulchan Aruch, whether you turn it over literally, which Ramah holds you have to, or the way we do it is you just lower it. What do you call it? You turn around the esrig and so on. Sorry, this is talking about turning around the esrig. And I told you last time, you have to be careful when you turn around the esrig, that you should pick it up upside down in the first place, rather than upside, and then afterwards it's in your hand, turn it upside down. And even on the Lashonos of Rashi, and most of Shonim doesn't pick that out. But if you look in the back of the Rif, the Rivav, he says, you look at his Lashon, says clearly turn it upside down and then pick it up. So he clearly bavarns that. But the Rava says another way that will alternative you haven't been over full tamish lahavchi. You didn't turn it upside down. You held through it. You had something else in your hand, and that thing picked up the lulav. So what are we talking about? We just a few days ago. Rava said that's all right. Hanimil did a cover, you didn't cover the away. If you do it in an insulting way, you have a keli, and then the keli you hold a pot, and then in there you hold a lot. That's not a cover the away. Then it doesn't work. So what it basically says is that you were not over. You talk about a case you were not yotze the mitzvah yet. Why doesn't the Gemara say the alternative that you had a mind not to be yotze? That you had a mind not to be yotze. So then. What do you call it? That's one thing. The question we have to ask: why doesn't it just say you had a mind to be yotze? But the second thing is, I guess we're saying the guy's under pressure, so he's not thinking all these things through. Why don't we say? And the same thing is leaving the esrig behind. Why doesn't it say that? Because the whole purpose is he's taking it to shul, so he needs all arba minutes. So that obviously that's not a possibility. So the Gemara continues further. Amar says, however, he says that we'll see what he said about Torah Dvar Mitzvah. Rabbi Yossi, he said, he used to say, you have a chata sa'if and a oila sa'if. And the chata sa'if is done on one place in the Mizbech, was done on the south. The chata sa'if was done on the southwestern, on the on the southwestern corner, and the oila sa'if was done on the southeastern corner. But if it gets too many, then you do a few oilers on the southwestern corner. So there's a bunch of chatois that were there, and there's an oiler sa'if there because there wasn't enough room in the other corner, so he moved it over here, and the kohen made a mistake and thought that this was a chata sa'if. And the difference is the chata sa'if you eat, if you don't eat. Okay, so then what happened was, so Amir Yoshi Oilas Oiv Shenimsa Ben Akpayim, there was an Oilas that got mixed up with all of these other birds that were Chatais, Ukasava Chatas Oivi, and therefore rightfully he thought there was a Chatas Oiv because the vast majority of birds there are Chatais. And he made a mistake, but and he ate it, potted, he is potter. Micah Mashman, what's he trying to tell us? That Tobit Mitzvah potted. He was a Tobit Mitzvah, the Kohen, and because as we'll see in a minute, there's a mitzvah involved here in eating, and therefore he's potter. No, Hainu Hach is not the same thing he told us about the lulav, that if the mitzvah is what caused you to make an error in judgment, that you're excused. Nay, Ma'odem husband it's a potted Hainu of a mitzvah. In the case of a lulav, you're taking it and you're going to do a mitzvah. But he didn't even do a mitzvah. Here, you're not supposed to eat the oil of slave. In reality, it was an oil of slave. The oil was not meant to be eaten at all. And therefore, and you went ahead and ate it. So it's a Torah mitzvah, and you didn't do any mitzvah whatsoever. So maybe, therefore, it won't be good enough excuse. Kamashmalan, that it's good enough. So he argues that even a Torah mitzvah, and you didn't do a mitzvah, there's no mitzvah involved at all, because there's no mitzvah in eating. There's definitely a mitzvah in eating a chatas oif. We had so the pasuk ochlu oisa mashekupa behem. The kohen must eat it in order. That's part of the kapara, but not oilus oif. So therefore, it's a Torah mitzvah. But and he didn't end up doing a mitzvah. This is like the case of the bris milah, where you took the Sunday baby twins and the Sunday baby, and you molled it on Shabbos. You didn't do a mitzvah. And we would have thought that a basi holds us that's not good excuse, like Rameir holds it. Kamashwan, that it's still good enough. Basi, I'll ask you a question. We learned if somebody, let's say, every morning you have to shech the carbon tummy every afternoon, and the 4 days before you put them in the pen and you watch them and monitor them and make sure that there are no blemishes on the animals. What happens? He takes an animal to shech, but he takes it. It was not. It was not observed for 4 days prior to bringing the carbon. The Shabbos, if you did that on a Shabbos, chayim chatas. Why? Because you shecht in a Shabbos, and it wasn't a mitzvah, because this tamid was not amavukah, was not inspected. So if it's a carbon tamid that was not inspected, then to do a mitzvah, you chayim chatas with sorry tamid achan tamid. You just said before Rabbi Yossi said that if you made a mistake because of mitzvah, even though you didn't end up doing a mitzvah, for example, you ate the chatas ha'if, nevertheless. It turned out to be usually an oilus ha'if, and you thought it was a chatas ha'if. Nevertheless, he holds that it's enough to hold your potter. And here we say that no, that if you brought a carbon tummy and it's the wrong animal, you're chayiv a carbon chatas. It's not extenuating circumstances, because Torah mitzvah, v'lo yasa mitzvah, is not good enough. Contradicts Rabbi Yossi. No, take that off the table. It has nothing to do with our discussion. Why do he eat min alam Rav Shmuel bar Chatoy Rav Nuna Sava Amar Rav Yishcha bar Ashin Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav. You took it from the wrong pen. You took it from the wrong place, and therefore you took it from the wrong place. And when you were taking it, and you took it from a place that none of those animals was suitable for carbon tummy. It was from a pen that wasn't yet inspected at all, and therefore you weren't nervous. That there's no pressure when you went to to retrieve the carbon, and therefore because there's no pressure over here. It's negligent more than a mistake that the mitzvah caused you, and therefore Rabbi Yossi says in this case you're liable. Okay, we're up to the Mishnah now. Mikabel, talking about a lulav. A lulav today on Shabbos is muktzah, because you cannot use it. There's no mitzvah. It's muktzah. In those days on Shabbos, because the first day Yom Tov was on a Shabbos, it was a muktzah, and you can take it. Now women don't have a mitzvah of lulav. Mitzvah says mangrama. But the halach is like the Tanaim that says that a woman can do those mitzvahs. Machlekes if she makes a bracha between the Rambam, Rabbi Tam, if she makes bracha, she doesn't make a bracha, but nevertheless she could. So therefore, we're going to say that just like it's not muktzah for a man, neither is a muktzah for a woman. Either because she herself has a mitzvah, or like Rashi explains, and all of course you want to know why he has to explain it. Rashi explains, since it's suitable for a man, it's no longer a muktzah item. It's called a keli. Therefore, even for a woman, even if you hold, I guess, if she has no mitzvah, it's still not muktzah, because it's be'etzim, in essence, it's now a keli. So two possible reasons. So therefore, she can take the lulav and take it from her husband or from her children. And furthermore, you're allowed to then put it back. If, let's say, you store the lulav in water to keep it fresh, on Shabbos, you can put it back into the water. In fact, it's how to understand the Ramah. The Ramah says any Shabbos, not in the lulav. You can put a tree back if there's no flowers. When you put flowers in Shabbos in the water, the flowers bud, and that's not do. But if you just put trees, sticks back without no flowers, you can put it. Not the Ramos says not only back, we can put it in chachil in the water. According to some, others say only back. Rabbi Yehuda says bishab is marzin. You can always return it to the water. B'yamtiv meisifin, you can actually add. You can add more water. Well, b'moed machlifin and chalamoid, you can swap the water. And you know, they used to put in water to keep it fresh. And Rashi says an interesting thing here. Rashi says over here, the moed machlif. I'll just quote you the Rashi because it's an interesting Rashi. The choyle shel moed, a chalamoid, you can swap the water. Says Rashi, mitzvah lahachlif. There's a mitzvah to keep your lulav fresh. So there's a mitzvah to swap the water and put in fresh water. Where does Rashi get this idea that it's a mitzvah lahachlif? I guess, or maybe it's bothering Rashi. What do you have to tell me chalamoid? You can change or do whatever you want to chalamoid. So maybe Rashi is saying that the reason why the Mishnah says it's not just derech agav, it's giving you the contrast between Shabbos and chalamoid, but maybe you should be machlif the water. There's some kind of mitzvah to keep a wet towel wrapped around your lulav to keep it fresh. Very interesting. Says the Gemara, finishes the Mishnah, what age does the cotton have to have chinuch? At the moment that is old enough that he knows how to shake the lulav, which is what Taisa brought it. There's a mitzvah in shaking as well, because it doesn't say cotton, he knows how to pick up a lulav, make a bracha, because he knows how to shake it. So shaking is very important. How exactly do you give a child a lulav on the first day? We'll talk about it in the next few days. Says Gemara further, pshita, first of all, pshita, why shouldn't the woman be able to take the lulav from a child? I said the woman doesn't have a mitzvah for her. It's muktzah kamashon. That is not muktzah. Why not? Because either she's also, if she wants to, she can do the mitzvah, or as Rashi learns, since for a man it's not muktzah because it's a keli, he can use it. So for women also it's not muktzah. So we can learn a number of things. Child is old enough to shake the lulav. So we learn. A child's old enough to shake the lulav. That's when is considered chinuch. So chinuch is relative. Every mitzvah has a different stage of a child's life that he is suitable for. There's not one age that fits all. Say, 6 years old is chayiv on all the mitzvahs. Depends which mitzvah. Depends the age of the child, and it depends on the maturity of the child. So, for example, a child knows how to shake the lulav. It could be 3 years old, 5 years old, 7. It depends on the maturity of the child. Least atif, if a child knows how to wrap himself with a talis, chayiv. You have to put on tzitzis. Lishma tefillin. The child is old enough that he knows how to watch tefillin, and he won't go into the wrong places like the bathroom with it. And tefillin, which is interesting. What age exactly are we talking about over here regarding tefillin? Are we saying here that a young kid should start putting on tefillin? What exactly do we mean? We're talking about a 12-year-old child when he's already almost bar mitzvah, and he's old enough that he knows how to take care of it. The other tefillin, you buy tefillin. So interesting, by tefillin, it says the father has to buy him his own tefillin. When it comes to tzitzis, it doesn't say you have to buy your own tzitzis. And it comes to lulav, it doesn't say you have to buy a separate lulav for the child. Even though it should be the other way around, because tefillin doesn't have to be yours, so you can use his father's. But when it comes to a lulav, since there's a problem in a child benching lulav, we should really say you should buy a lulav for a child. We'll discuss that when we get to the Gemara about the problem with the children. Your day of the daba, child old enough to speak. Lang de Torah, because we didn't Torah Krishma. What's Torah? Amar Abshuluna Torah Tivul on a Moshe Marosh Gezak teaching that pasuk. Krishma, my pasuk edition. Alter Rebbe in the beginning of Hilchos Talmud Torah talks about that. The mitzvah of chinuch is on the parents, and the mitzvah is only midrabanan. But there's a mitzvah mahat for a father to teach his son Torah. There's no mitzvah on the child to learn Torah under bar mitzvah, but there's a mitzvah on the father. You have to teach them. Or the mitzvah to teach your child, and the Alter Rebbe in the first sifta talks about how first you teach him psukim by heart, but that's what this is talking about here. You teach him psukim by heart, and when the Mishnah Pirkei Avos says that Chodesh L'Mikra, they all Mephoshim want to know how do you reconcile the Mishnah Pirkei Avos with the Gemara right here. There it says 5 years old you start learning Chumash, and here we're teaching psukim from Chumash at 3 years old, or as soon as you start speaking, maybe 2 years old. So the Alter Rebbe they explain this is talking about teaching psukim by heart, and 5 years old talking about learning inside properly. If somebody is a child old enough and knows how to make sure that he does not become tamei, if he knows how to make sure that his goof doesn't come in contact with anything tamei, then you can, if he touches some food with his body, you can eat it and trust that it's k'toy. But if he touches it with his hand, you cannot, because we know have a rule. Yadayim shniya, saying hands are always moving about, so even the child might have touched something tamei. But lishma is the child's old enough, he knows how to make sure his hand doesn't touch things which are wrong. Then even if he touches things with his hand, you can eat taras. Trust him. Hayadeya Lishoyo, we learned from Saita the idea of tumah that in a private places and it's a suffix, and therefore we say that perhaps something occurred there between her and this other strange man. So therefore we have a rule that a suffix tumah in your Reshus HaYachid, if you're doubtful whether you touch something tummy in a private place, we automatically assume you're tummy because it's like Saita. But if it's in a Reshus HaRabim in a public place, there's no Saita in a public. If she was talking to this guy in a public place, there's no Saita. So too, there's no tumah if there's a suffix Reshus HaRabim whether you touch something and you know you touch something, you're not sure with tummy or not, the wind and blew it away, for example, then is that you are tired. And we also learn from a Saita that it has to be something that you can ask questions to. So therefore we say as follows. So if this kid, for example, is old enough that you can ask him questions, what happened here, then we should say, then we'll have the same rules like everybody else. And is tired, and if he's to ask him, say, I don't know. So you'll be tamei, and you'll be tired. If he's not old enough to ask a question, then no matter where it is, it's always tired. Because you have a cheskes tara, you have this assumption that you were tired till now. We're going to say, you know what, leave it tired. What about if a child's old enough to know how to do you don't allow him to go visit the people's houses to take truma because he's too young, but we allow him to receive truma. Now, but if a child's not old enough to do, we don't give him truma at all. We don't give him a piece of truma as well. He said yes. He can go if he's old enough to duchen. He can go to people's houses with beis hagronis. He can go to people's threshing floors and pick up truma. If he's not that old, he cannot go to people's houses, but he can stay home and the parents will give him. When he goes out, when he duchens, everybody now knows he's a kohen and he can go out. Now, what age are we talking about when he can duchen? It's a very big machlekes here. What age exactly we're talking about? So some say over here that we're talking about that it says here cotton. So some say Taisha holds has to be a minimum bar mitzvah to be able to duchen. Under mitzvah, he's not duchen at all, and even over bar mitzvah, he shouldn't really duchen unless he's together with other people. Because in order to duchen in this Marasaita, you have to be 18 years old. You have to have a smali lezaken. You have to have some kind of beard because it has to be a dignified thing. Rashi holds that even a cotton under bar mitzvah can duchen only together with other people and join in. The Kohen takes under bar mitzvah, cannot go. Any child shouldn't go up to duchen, regardless if other people are there with him. If a child goes at a sheikh, you could eat from the shchita provided as an older person standing there and observing, making sure that he does it correctly. We're talking about a child who was trained in the shchita. He doesn't have to know. He doesn't know the laws of shchita, but he has to know how to use the knife in a skilled way, so that he doesn't, pause it too long. All the problems we had in chulin with shachting, you have to make sure you do it correctly. That means that if somebody was watching him and he did it correctly, but he wasn't trained in it, it's no good. If a child is old enough that he can eat a kazayis of grains, then we say that any waste that comes out of him, any excrement that comes out of him already has a status of excrement that you're not allowed to daven in front of it. You have to move for amos. But it has to be a kazayis of the we already had a number of times what's considered eating, only if you eat it within a certain span of time. A pras means a half. So we learned in Mar Erevin that a full bread is 2 meals, and that's what you have to put out there when you want to walk an extra 2,000 amma. And one meal is a pras, half of that. We had a machlekes Tanoim, machlekes Rashi and Rambam, whether it's 8 eggs and half therefore is the size of 4 eggs, or 4 eggs. Or 6 eggs and half the size of 3 eggs, and that's how we calculate all the different times of mitzvahs. You have to eat a kazayis within the time period of the achilas pras. Most of the folks learn achilas pras is from the moment you start eating to the moment you finish eating. Not like a couple of Rishonim say it's the time between the two eatings. That's called the achilas pras, which gives you a bit more time. So he has to be able to eat achilas pras. An average person, how long it takes. So if this child can eat a kazayis within the time that an average person eats, the 3 eggs or the 4 eggs, let's say 7 minutes, 9 minutes, then the child is considered old enough that any excrement is considered excrement. Otherwise, no. And there's a big machlekes, and actually Shulchan Aruch and Sim Pei Aleph, it seems there's a machlekes as well. All of these things, when we say der chilas pras, does that mean of wheat? We use only wheat as a standard, or depending the kind of food the kid is eating, how long it would take to eat that particular food. Anyway, and and the argument, for example, is regarding coffee. When we measure coffee, is it, do we measure like any other drink, or do we say each drink you have to measure according to how long it normally takes people to drink that drink, the quantity of that drink in the amount of time? And same thing with all solids as well. Do we just have one standard of wheat and it takes 7 minutes, whatever it is, or every single item with eight? Let's see what people know, how long it takes people normally to eat, a price of that, and that's the time, which will vary then according to each food item. By an adult, but an older person, even if they don't eat, let's say they're too old already, they're feeble and they cannot eat so much, nevertheless, their waste, the excrement, is still treated as excrement. We don't say, oh, well, they can no longer eat, maybe we should treat them, their excrement is no longer excrement. See what it says, the older you get, the more schmerzen you have, the more pain you have. So therefore it doesn't, and everything is foul anyway, so this child is old enough that he can eat a kazayis of roast. It takes a bit longer to eat a kazayis of roast because it's dry compared to something moist. Then he's old enough that you include him in the current Pesach. And it says each person according to their standard. It has to be old enough that he can understand what part is food and what part isn't food. Kate said, you don't have to stand and break it up for him. Nice, like, sorry, give him a pebble. We had this thing where getting this is like sort of one of the ways of monitoring or testing a child to see their maturity. You gave him a pebble, the zarka, they throw it away. Eggers, give them a nut, the night they take it to eat it, they know they can distinguish between one another, and that's considered maturity, and they include in the Korban Pesach. Hadden aloch lulav hagozel. Now the Gemara continues. Lulav, you have a lulav and you have an arava. There's two. When we say arava, the lulav also has an arava. But when we say lulav and arava, is because there's a separate mitzvah, we'll see later in the Gemara, to circle the mizbeach with arava. They should put it next to the mizbeach, have their arava there. So we'll see later all about that. So lulav and arava. Sometimes shisha, sometimes it's only 6 days sukkahs because Shabbos you don't do it, and sometimes shiva 7, all the days of sukkahs, depending if the first day by lulav, as we'll see, if the first day of sukkahs is Shabbos, we bench lulav everywhere, but the rest of the days we don't. If it comes out of Shabbos, and by arava it's the other way around. If a Hoshana Rabbah came out on Shabbos, we would make the Hoshinus. And we'll see later, is to negate the opinion of the Tzdukim that didn't believe in the whole idea of shyness. So we dafka made it so special, because it's not written in the Torah, it's a lot more sinner. We dafka made it so special that even on Shabbos, we are going to make the Hoshina. And we decided to do it on the 7th day rather than the first, because the first, they would think, well, since Lulav, anyway you're doing, so you're doing Hoshina, it doesn't prove anything. Therefore, we had to choose a day, and we chose the 7th day. And that's why we make sure on our calendar, Hoshina Rabbah never falls out of Shabbos, because if it does, you would have to do Hoshina on Shabbos. So both of Shisha and Shiva, sometimes 6, 7. Hallel, when it comes to Hallel, to finish Hallel, on Sukkot, we complete Hallel every day. On Pesach, we don't. 2 reasons given. One reason is because Pesach is not a full Simcha because the Goyim died. Another reason is Sukkot every day is a separate Yom Tov because the amount of Kabbanas vary. Pesach every day is the same amount of Kabbanas. So therefore, on Pesach, we only do a half Hallel, but on the Sukkot, every day is like a new Yom Tov. And Simcha, the Korban Simcha, you have to eat meat of a Shlomim, Shmoin is 8 days, including Shmini Atzeres. And how you get to 8 days is because you cannot, if it falls out on Sunday, how do you get meat, Motzei Shabbos? Because Shabbos you couldn't shecht. Friday, Korban Shlomim won't last you till Motzei Shabbos, or 2 days in the night. So either it's Basar Chulin, some Rishonim say, your Yetzer Shlamim, your Yetzer Mitzvah Simcha, and that's a right that even today there's a Mitzvah HaTorah to eat meat on Yom Tov. Or, as the Papa says, you can give other things, you can give wine, you give other things to make people happy. Is 8 days. Because Simcha also includes Shmini Atzeres. Remember, we had the Rabbis lately Shmini Atzeres. Ach Sameach to include the night of Shmini Atzeres. We had a Psachim. Sukkah, V'nitzach HaMayim, the mitzvah of Sukkah, the mitzvah of pouring the water, which is by every Korban, every day in the morning, by the Korban Tamid, is Shiva, is 7 days. Cholol, the flutes that they play, Chamisha is 5 days, or Shisha is 6 days. That Simcha's Beis HaSheva. So they didn't do it on Yom Tov, started the second day. So sometimes it was 6 days if there was no Shabbos there, and sometimes it was 5 days if there was a Shabbos there. They used to play the flute when they did Nisach HaMayim, and they did the hops and the whole thing there. So that's why sometimes it's 5 and sometimes it's 6. Lulav, Shiva, 7 days. Why? Now Gemara explains. Lulav 7 days because it pushes away Shabbos. Kates. The first day Yom Tov falls on Shabbos. Lulav Shiva Lulav 7 days. If Shabbos falls out on any other day, we won't be benching Lulav, as we'll soon see why. And therefore, it's only 6 days. And even in the Beis Hamikdash, they wouldn't bench if it fell out on Shabbos, even though it's Mahatayda. The Rabboni came in, stepped in, and says you can't. Rav Shiva, the same thing. Kate, the 7th day, Shana Rabba fell on Shabbos, Rav Shiva, then you do Rabbas then as well, and 7 days. All other days, if a Shana Rabba falls out on any other day, Shisha is only 6 days. Mitzvahs Lulav Ketzad. How did they do it? If Lulav fell out on the Shabbos, the first day of Sukkot, what did they do? Is Yom Tov Yechad Chol Shabbos, for Shabbos, Melichin Es the Lulein Laharabayis. They would bring the Lulavim to the Beis Hamikdash when prior to Shabbos, Vachazonin Mekablin Oison, and they would give it to the Shamashim who would take it from them. They would organize themselves before Shabbos. And it's interesting. Here we're bringing it to the Beis Hamikdash, and we learned in the Mishnah. Yesterday that they used to bring it to Shul, Beis HaKnesses. So the Gemara initially is going to say that this is talking about in the time Beis Hamikdash, and the previous Mishnah is talking about after the Churban Beis Hamikdash, and which means that maybe they weren't even shuls in the times of Beis Hamikdash. But then the Gemara concludes that they're both talking about the Zman Beis Hamikdash, those who were in Mishalayim, but Beis Hamikdash, the rest went to a Shul. In a Shul, and the Shul, I tell you that because of less people, they were able to recognize their own lulav. It was easy. It was the Beis Hamikdash. We had so many who love him. What were they supposed to do? How are they going to recognize their own lulav? So therefore, this is what they did. Now, interesting that in Yerushalayim, they didn't make an Eid. They had to prepare all this before Yom Tov. And even though Yerushalayim had a wall around it, so this Rabbeinu Ephraim says that they did not make an Eid in Yerushalayim because since the Eden, there's a big influx of Eden from many other regions, and they weren't coming to Chamim, they saw everybody carrying their Shabbos, they wouldn't know the difference. So therefore, and we were scared that when they go home, they would continue to carry our Shabbos. They, Yerushalayim, I saw all these Rabbonim carrying. Why can't I carry? They don't understand that there was an Eid there and so on. And that's Moshe's whole shit, why he was against general Eid in general, is because of that Rabbeinu Ephraim. And then he continues over here. Okay, so what happened was Baskenim, okay, the Soinos and Agabi, so put it on the platform, they had all these benches there with the roof cover, they would put all the lulav there. But Haskenim, the elderly people, and they couldn't go fight in the morning to get the lulav. So Menicha Shalhem Belishcha, they had a separate chamber for them. We teach all the people, and there's no way in the world you recognize which lulav is yours. There'll be thousands of them. To say, you know what? Whoever ends up with my lulav, I'm giving him a matana. When he takes it, retrospectively, it's a matana to him, and vice versa. The lulav that I took, whoever the real owner is, will give a matana to me. So this way, everybody will have their own lulav, which is a prerequisite. The following morning, mashkimin, they would come, they'll come to the shul, to the Beis Hamikdash, v'chazonin zerkin noisef, the Chazanim would throw. There's no queue, it would take forever. They just threw the lulav out there. You can imagine what kind of chaos there was. It was mayhem. Everybody would grab, umakin ish as and they used to hit each other, bang each other. There's lulav flying around. You could poke somebody's eyes out. It's pretty dangerous stuff. The Bezin realized that this is dangerous, this kind of activity. They made a special kakana called echad ve'echad neitul bebeisay. They said that everyone should be yaitzel lulav in their own home and not bring it to the Beis Hamikdash prior because it was too dangerous. Okay,